UFC 303 is this weekend, formerly known as the Conor McGregor card, but he got injured, and we got a better fight, in my opinion, which is Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2. And when you talk about rematches, you obviously have to talk about their first fight, and their first fight was one of the best fights of all of last year.
Yeah, obviously Conor McGregor brings some sort of hype to the fight that no one else does. But if you're a diehard fan and you like competitive fights, because my brother and I, we both like title fights just because they just hit differently, especially when the result is in. Because obviously you win the title or the title might change, it might stay versus, a contender fight like McGregor versus Chandler. It's like, oh, McGregor won, cool, what's next? Versus actually getting a title fight. But I'm super excited for this fight. Jiri Prochazka always puts on crazy fights, and so does Alex Pereira, and their first fight was a great one. And it was a very competitive fight. A lot of people didn't think it was going to be after that first round, but it was incredibly competitive.
Yeah, in the first round, Pereira, the story was his leg kicks. Prochazka was dealing with them terribly, but you can't blame him because Pereira is the best in the game when it comes to those leg kicks. And after like 2 or 3, he had taken Prochazka off his feet, and he was really dominating with those leg kicks. The first round wasn't very boxing heavy. The second round was, which we'll talk about here in a second. But at the end of the round, Prochazka did take down Pereira. Pereira getting up at the end of the round, which was probably a good confidence booster. But the second round was where all the action happened, with Prochazka hurting Pereira. We are Pereira fans, so we were actually very concerned as Prochazka was landing a lot of shots, especially an overhand right by the cage. That left me pretty concerned, and it looked like Prochazka was kind of close to finishing that fight.
Yeah, we all know Alex Pereira is a little bit vulnerable to those right hands. If you don't think he is, look at the way he got stunned by Adesanya both times. Exactly the same thing. Overhand right. And, going into the second round, it looked like Alex Pereira was going to cruise to a win. That leg seemed like it was pretty much done after just like 3 leg kicks, which just shows how crazy Alex Pereira's leg kicks are. But when he went to that round, Alex Pereira is backing up consistently against Jiri Prochazka. We've seen Alex Pereira back up against Sean Strickland, but it wasn't to the same degree. And, he started to piece him up, and we both don't really trust Alex Pereira's chin too much. No. Whenever he got hit by Jiri Prochazka, you saw there was a pretty big reaction out of it. And, there's just one clip right by the cage. I think pretty much everyone who watched the fight saw it. Right by the cage, through a crazy overhand right. You could literally hear the impact. And then you just see Alex Pereira kind of get a little bit of a reaction from it. And I was pretty concerned from that point on.
Yeah, Pereira has like a stoic reaction. He's kind of that's kind of when he gets hit. It's weird because a lot of people kind of show it more. Pereira doesn't, but it's just a different kind of feeling that you can see from Pereira in how he looks when he gets hurt. And Prochazka was really coming at him, but I think it was like maybe 10 to 20 seconds after Prochazka landed that big shot, Pereira ended up finishing the fight. Pereira had a combo that he'd been practicing, which was it was a right hand and then a hook, which he ended up finishing Prochazka with. But it looked like an early stoppage. It was weird because Prochazka was definitely hurt. He was grabbing at him, and then all of a sudden he just dipped in the middle of a takedown is what would be looked at by the ref. So I don't blame him for stopping it. It was a very, very early stoppage, though. We've seen it with Mark Goddard before. We made a video on it where he stops fights early. The Adesanya Pereira fight, whether you think so or not, was an early stoppage. Pereira would have won anyways, but it was an early stoppage. And problems with those, it leads to problems. Like Prochazka said, it was an early stoppage after the fact, after the fight, like maybe a week or two after. Adesanya still to this day copes with that first fight because of early stoppage. I think it was an early stoppage, but Pereira showed his power with that last finishing sequence.
Yeah, he did stun him really badly. He did drop him pretty bad. The finish was so strange because it was like, I was watching and I was like, is the fight over? Because, Jiri Prochazka stood right back up. Alex Pereira tripped on, he tripped on Mark Goddard, I think.
Yeah.
And so it was just a really strange stoppage, but it's hard to deny that, Alex Pereira was going to finish him. He was in mount. Jiri Prochazka was hurt. But Alex Pereira won that fight, although it was a little bit shaky towards the end.
Yep, and then, their next fight was awesome. Although this fight is short notice because of the McGregor pulling out, they both fought at UFC 300, which we went to. So we saw it live, so we got some, in-depth analysis on their UFC 300 fights. First was Prochazka versus Rakic on that card, and that was one of his favorite fights of the night. It was an awesome fight, but we're going to need to analyze it in terms of looking into Prochazka versus Pereira. And Prochazka was getting hurt by leg kicks again by Rakic. Rakic was just cracking it with leg kicks, especially in the first round. You need to keep in mind that Rakic did have a staph infection for this fight. And also have to keep in mind, I don't think Prochazka had a staph infection, but something along those lines with this fight against Pereira. So you have to remember that as well. But you can see Rakic start to kind of die out in that second round. And I think what that fight showed us is Prochazka cannot deal with leg kicks well. Prochazka has sneaky power and good power, but also Prochazka has a great chin that you can trust.
Yeah, that first round, I was expecting Jiri Prochazka to be quite dominant just because this was Rakic's first fight back in a long time, but Rakic looked very impressive. Like you mentioned, the leg kicks were great, and we saw that Jiri Prochazka has a chin on him. He was cracking him, and, going into that second round, Rakic had won that first round. It looked like he was going to keep the momentum going, but in that second round, Jiri just cracked him and ended up finishing him, and, Jiri Prochazka's fights are just incredible all the time. But again, it shows that Jiri Prochazka is vulnerable to leg kicks. I think it has to do a lot with those stances, and with Alex Pereira, that's going to be an issue. And it shows he has a chin, and it's hard to fight a guy that's constantly marching you down and eating shots.
Yeah, and then, with UFC 300, we also had the main event, which was Pereira versus Jamal Hill. And Pereira showed that he is an elite kickboxer, and people should stop trying to kickbox with him. Finished him very quickly. It was a slow fight up until the finish, but it showed Pereira has insane power in that left hook, which is just a deadly weapon. And, Jamal Hill, we were saying that he might be a bad matchup because he's a natural southpaw, but Pereira finished him quickly. And he's building on that momentum. Has a lot of momentum coming into this rematch with Prochazka.
Yeah, Jamal Hill, definitely thought it was going to be a far more competitive fight. Not only because, Jamal Hill seemed very impressive up to that point. He had only lost to Paul Craig from an armbar. And he was talking a lot. I told my brother about this. It's kind of like if Ilia Topuria lost to Volkanovski, like talking a lot prior and then losing. It just looks really bad. And then Jamal Hill's coping really, really hard. And it was quite crazy to see how easy Alex Pereira made it look, especially with how much Jamal Hill was talking. And, although Jamal Hill is kind of getting trolled right now, he is a great striker, and Alex Pereira did finish him quite quickly. And, the issue of he's a southpaw, he's going to struggle with southpaws, it showed that Alex Pereira is an elite kickboxer who has answers for pretty much anything.
Exactly. So, going in, we're going to give our predictions for Alex Pereira versus Jiri Prochazka 2. And my prediction is Alex Pereira by third round knockout.
I say the same way. Yeah. Alex Pereira by third round knockout.
We typically have the same predictions. I'm guessing that's because we just converse a lot off camera. But we haven't gotten a title fight prediction wrong on the history of this channel. So I guess it's working. But
we thought that we got the Steve Erceg Pantoja fight wrong. But we technically got it right. So.
Yeah, so with Pereira, he has a lot of aura, as the kids say nowadays, going into this fight. He has insane amount of momentum. I feel like when Pereira stepped in for 300, being the headline guy at 300 gives you a lot of momentum and a lot of confidence. And he's becoming more social, he's becoming a bigger star. And he's, when you have that energy behind you, it shows in your fights. That's why a lot of these champions keep getting better and better, because you got that aura, you have the confidence in your skills, and it really shows. And then you also have to consider the momentum from the fact he already beat Prochazka. So he's going into this fight already beaten the guy he's fighting, and the other guy, knowing the other guy is actually afraid and aware of his power. However, Prochazka did have, I guess, a staph infection, something like that in that last fight. Prochazka's chin is good, doesn't deal with leg kicks well, but if Prochazka has a chance, it's because his chin is way better than Pereira's. But I still think Pereira will fend off anything Prochazka's got for him, and Pereira will end up finishing him, just cracking that chin eventually.
Yeah, this fight was one where I was actually going back and forth. For a while, the Volkanovski-Topuria fight, I was going back and forth, but then I was very, very confident in Topuria. This one, I'm still not incredibly confident because of that second round. Jiri Prochazka, it looked like he was going to get the finish, honestly.
Yeah.
Whenever I was watching it live, I thought that he was going to get the finish. But when it comes to Alex Pereira, it's very hard for me to doubt him, and it's going to be the same reason why I predicted him over Jamal Hill. Alex Pereira, I just cannot, I have to go with him in a kickboxing fight. You just can't not back Alex Pereira in a kickboxing fight. He has so much experience in kickboxing. He's shown that he's an elite striker and that he's beaten every single striker in the UFC besides Adesanya, but he had beaten him, and honestly, he looked more impressive in that second fight. I just don't see how Jiri Prochazka can beat such an elite kickboxer like Alex Pereira, but Jiri Prochazka did look very good in that second round.
And Prochazka is unorthodox, which I feel like gives Pereira some issues. He also has the chin, so his unorthodox striking and his good chin can get him this win, but like you said, you can't go against Alex Pereira in a kickboxing fight, so Alex Pereira is going to win this fight and still.